Hey everyone, today I just wanted to make a quick video regarding the SpellSlinger changes. These are some of the worst and most short-sighted nerfs I think I've ever seen GGG put into the game. These are an absolute joke. They are made as a result of incompetence by people who are not playing the game and are completely out of touch with the changes they're making. The people who made these changes clearly don't understand the math behind these changes, and I cannot stress in strong enough words how bad I think these changes are for the game. Not just because of the way they're going to negatively impact players, but I also think it goes to show that no one is at the wheel at GGG. They just, covering their eyes and throwing darts at a dartboard at this point, as far as I'm concerned. I'm not gonna spend all day ranting on. I'm just gonna be straight to the point, and I'll make my case, and then you can leave me some feedback in the comments section. So let's first look through the current SpellSlinger uses. So to start off with, we have a whole bunch of League starters that use SpellSlinger. You have the KB Flame Wall League starter, you have Lightning Slinger, which is used typically for Stormbrand and some other builds. You have Chaos Slinger, which is eventually transitioned into full-on ED Contagion. Then you have Blade for Blade Blast, right? Which is the weakest version of Blade for Blade Blast. Like the much stronger versions of Blade for Blade Blast are the Unleash versions that are self-casted, typically using Poison or Archmage. This version, the SpellSlinger version, is probably the least optimal way to play it. You would only really play this because it automates the procedure. You don't have to press two buttons, but it does come at the cost of a lot of damage and a lot of efficiency, right? So the other use of them is for bad or off-meta builds. Fire Slinger, Cold Dot Slinger, Volatile Dead. These are all builds you can use. You can do the entire game with them if you pump enough money into them, but they're not strong. There's a reason why Volatile Dead fell out of the meta after SpellSlinger received a nerf a couple of patches ago. It's just not a strong build for doing the entire endgame, on a reasonable budget, right? You can do the endgame with these builds, but you wouldn't want to because there's just a lot of better builds that are going to give you much more mileage with the amount of money you put into them. So what else? Literally nothing, right? I see some people mention that, like certain Slinger setups are really good for leveling and all that, but the bottom line is, if you look at the racing setups for every single class in Ascendancy, none of them really use SpellSlinger. The closest thing you get to races using SpellSlinger is in certain hardcore events. You will see some of them using Chaos Slinger just with a Trickster, typically as a means of farming their ED Contagion gear a little faster, at the point that these dot skills aren't falling off. Running the Slinger setup is just a little easier on the hands. It's marginally faster than self-cast, but eventually you do have to drop it by the time you get to Cirrus because the damage is completely fallen off a cliff, and you're not going to be able to actually do the content with it, right? So let's look at GGG's take on SpellSlinger. GGG writes that it is now going to cost, and this was on a Reddit thread, so the Reddit thread was asking, is SpellSlinger going to also make spells cost mana in addition to reserving mana? And GGG said it does cost mana. The next person wrote, with no reduction of the reservation whatsoever. GGG confirmed indeed that was the case. And then another person asked, is this an oversight? Feels like it doesn't work with the skill at all. And they said no. The rationale behind it is that it already allows you to ignore cast speed and also adds damage based on your wand. It now no longer allows you to ignore the mana cost of the triggered skills, right? This is the single most disingenuous take from a GGG employee I have ever seen. There is no exception to that statement that I just made. This makes no sense, and I don't know how these words were written seriously, right? If this was April Fool's, I would understand it as an April Fool's joke, but we are in the middle of July. I don't know what to make of this. This doesn't make sense, and it's just completely out of touch with reality. The person who wrote this is delusional in every sense of the word. Right. I'm just going to get into... So we'll look at the pros and cons, and then I'll show you the POB that I've cooked up, right? So the pros and cons, GGG would have you believe ignoring mana cost is pro. The con, however, is that it reserves loads of mana, preventing the use of auras, right? So ignoring the mana cost is a very small benefit for the fact that you're then losing access to auras, which are very large damage multipliers. GGG says it ignores cast speed. That's a pro. It's actually a con. Ignoring cast speed forces you to invest really deep into cooldown reduction in order to increase your hit rate, and then even when you invest into cooldown reduction, you then also have to invest into attack speed, right? Where you're investing into two separate stats, and cooldown reduction has a particularly high opportunity cost where you can only get it on belts or boots, which means a lot of the best unique boots and a lot of the best unique belts in the game take up those slots. So you're giving up those slots in order to access the cooldown reduction, and then on top of that, you have to further invest attack speed, and that's just to achieve a hit rate that's about half of what you can very easily achieve using self-cast or other methods, right? This is absurd that they think this is a pro. It's a con. This limits the DPS of the ability significantly, right? Then GGG would have you believe that it adds damage based on 1 damage, but this costs a prefix anyway, and it yields a very extremely minor benefit over conventional spell sailing. Now, I know a lot of people are going to disagree on this point. I'm going to show you in the POB why this is, this isn't really a pro, right? It's just an alternative way of scaling 1 damage, but that doesn't necessarily mean it makes the skill, the gem strong or anything, right? And then the last pro, I guess, of the gem is that you can cast multiple skills at once. But the con is that you lose access to your 6 links because one of your 6 gems has to be SpellSlinger, right? So I've cooked up a case study. I have a bunch of template characters, and I pulled a couple out, and I did this little experiment with a bunch of my template characters, and the results were all the same. So I'm not going to go through all of them. I'm just going to go through the Arc Assassin, which I've reconfigured the tree a little bit. So these are kind of these like template characters where I have a rough tree set up to show me all the different nodes I'm going to take if I wanted to play a certain skill using a certain style of build, just for my reference for future. That way, when I go to do theory crafting for a certain build, I can load up a template and then work off the template rather than starting from scratch. You already have a bunch of items imported already in, that sort of stuff, right? I want to make clear, this is not the single best way to get this point across. These trees are not fully optimized for SpellSlinger or for self-casting. These are just template characters, which they have a lot of generic damage here, and I've taken out most of the cast speed investment that was previously in this template. So the early cast speed you'll find here is 5% here and 5% here. All the other nodes have been moved to life nodes, power charge, mana reservation, power, that sort of thing, right? Oh, is there a little bit up here? Does this give cast speed? No, it doesn't. Okay, so literally just 10% cast speed, which we're not going to benefit from. And then, in this case, you have reduced mana cost of skills, which you're probably not going to run in the SpellSlinger setup. I mean, you would have to in future, but you're currently not, right? So, now, basically, I'll also show you, real quick, the items, right? And I'll show you why the wand damage doesn't make a difference, right? So, people would have you believe Void Batteries, terrible ones for SpellSlinger, but actually, given this build, the way it works, with value and power charges, I cooked up the single best possible Imbued Wand, right? Imbued Wand is the best base type for SpellSlinger. I cooked up the best possible wand for this, where you have tier 1 attack speed, tier 1 crit chance to spells, tier 1 crit multi, +2 to lightning spell gems, and then also tier 1 lightning damage to attacks with maxed out rolls, right? And equipping these actually lowers your SpellSlinger DPS compared to running Void Batteries, right? So when they say that you can scale the 1 damage, and that's a pro, it's not really, because a lot of the best ones don't even care about that, and they don't use it in any way, and they want different prefixes. So when you look at budget ones, none of the budget ones are scaling the 1 damage for actual SpellSlinger damage, and then when you look at the high end, none of them are doing that either, in most cases. There are exceptions, of course, right? Volatile Dead famously used essences to scale flat fire damage, right? But that was still only marginally better than not doing it that way. And that's really important to understand, that GGG tout this as a big pro of using SpellSlinger, but it's not really, right? So I won't bore you with all the details, but basically, if you had a SpellSlinger set up with a 5-link, optimized gems, you're using Frenzy, you're activating Wrath, that's going to leave you with minus 2% unreserved mana. So I'm being really generous here because I had allocated 5 extra nodes on the tree that were doing nothing. I'm going to assume that you found other ways of reducing your mana reservation to fit in Wrath in this setup. Very generous. 1.1 million DPS using this setup, right? And we're also ignoring attribute requirements, that sort of thing, right? On the other hand, if you used a self-cast arc setup with Wrath and Zealotry, and I've taken the nodes on the tree for the reduced mana cost, I took Inspiration for the reduced mana cost, all that sort of thing. Because that way, you're basically casting your spell twice a second. I know it says 4 times a second, but that's because of the spell echo. You don't pay the mana cost twice, so it's like twice a second. You're paying 86 mana a second, and you're regening 89 mana a second, so it's a neutral on mana cost here. You have 20% unreserved mana with the setup, and you're getting 2.3 million DPS, right? Which is more than double the SpellSlinger setup. And this just sort of goes to show you that when you add up all the cons of using SpellSlinger, like losing access to your extra link, losing access to damaging auras, losing access to higher cast speeds, losing access to the support gems that are specific to self-cast or specific to other forms of dealing damage, right? Because like if you're using totems, for example, you'd be able to run Soul Mantle and all the benefits that come with that. Running SpellSlinger has a lot of costs associated with it, and those costs add up to basically more than halving the DPS of most skills, right? I could spend all night going through every different template that I have and optimizing them to be as generous as possible for SpellSlinger setups, and I really encourage you to do this for yourself if you want as an experiment, but the short of it is that SpellSlinger basically halves your damage compared to not using SpellSlinger, and that's a really big deal. I do suspect it's going to be less in the future with the support gem nerfs. That's definitely going to drop the gap between them, but it's not going to drop it by that much. It's still going to be like 40% less damage one way or another, and that's really the problem here, is that GGG believes SpellSlinger is too strong, and I don't see any evidence of it being too strong. It's not being used in races, it's not the ideal way to level a character, it's not producing any kind of OP league starter builds, it's not producing any OP high investment builds. Where did SpellSlinger need a nerf? SpellSlinger, if anything, could have actually used a buff. There are a lot of situations where you could argue that the vast majority of the use cases of SpellSlinger are kind of on the weak side, right? If anything, I was expecting SpellSlinger to be buffed slightly, but to nerf it by making it pay the mana cost, that also especially hurts this right here. Can cast multiple skills at once, and the Lightning Slinger uses 3 different spells attached to SpellSlinger, and eventually a 4th. I have practiced with the assumption that these nerfs are going to go through, and it basically kills the build, because you have to cut Ball Lightning out of the Lightning Slinger setup, dropping down to 3 skills, but then you also have to pay about 78 mana per cast, which you don't have room on the tree to make up for, so the setup is basically dead. You can't league start Lightning Slinger anymore, which really hurts a lot of builds. So the main problem here is basically that prior to the SpellSlinger thing and prior to the manifesto, I simply thought that GGG had a vision of PoE that was different to mine, which was okay because they were game developers and they had access to more information than I did. So even though I disagreed with them, it was okay because I was going to be proven in the wrong. After seeing these SpellSlinger changes, it makes me realize that they don't know what they're doing, and it just reflects poorly on all the changes being proposed. The Flask nerfs, the support gem nerfs, all the other nerfs that they're proposing. These nerfs are not being made by people who are playing their own game and are making decisions to try and better the health of the game or steer the game in a direction that is going to make the game more fun. These are people who are basically, analyzing data despite being far removed from the generation of that data, right? They're not playing the game and they're not making well-informed decisions. I could rant about this for another 20 to 30 minutes. I'm not going to. I said this is going to be a shorter video, so I'm going to kind of leave it there. I know a lot of you guys are going to disagree with me, so feel free to leave your comments in the description. It's totally okay to disagree here, but I have spoken to a number of other top players, and I have not... There were a lot of people who were defending the proposals to the Flask nerfs and the support gem nerfs with me privately when I was talking to them. I would say it was about 60% disagree, and 40% of people I spoke to agreed with the nerfs that GGG are proposing. I have not spoken to a single person who thinks the SpellSlinger nerf makes any sense whatsoever, and so I'm just going to leave you with that. If you think the SpellSlinger nerf makes sense, feel free to leave your reasons why and to explain why you think I'm wrong. I'd be very interested in hearing your opinion on it. We won't agree, but I'm still going to be interested in hearing your take, because at this point I'm having trouble even comprehending how anyone could think these SpellSlinger nerfs made sense. The people who think these nerfs make sense have obviously, in my opinion, never actually played SpellSlinger. They don't understand the opportunity cost, the weaknesses, and I just want to understand how do these people think? What makes you tick? Where are you coming from? Anyway, hit me up. I'm going to leave it here. I'll catch you guys in the next one.